project. That is a challenge project. We assess that is needed during this time to launch and to have this kind of cooperation between European Union countries, particularly Romania and Asia as a whole continent, to start to understand our needs and common interests, focusing on that issue. At the beginning, only for a short to make an overview why we decided to promote this kind of project, Asia Century, and what was the motivation. And after that, we have a few speakers. 3 of them are here, and another 3 are online. So we benefit this digitalization in order to mix or to have this kind of hybrid format event. I have a special guest, Professor Anis, is coming from Vienna, and but originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina, to give us more thoughts related to the Asia. His expertise is focusing most on Eastern Asia and ASEAN countries. So at the beginning, only to say about something related to our project. Yeah, next slide. The project was initiated by MEPEI and the International Institute for Middle East and Balkan Studies, that here is represented by Professor Anis. And we have through 3 major partners: National Institute for Research and Development in Informatics, Bucharest, and another main partner from Austria, Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. Of course, European Defense Romania, represented here by Professor Liviu Mureșan. Our objectives related to the project: we think there is in the current circumstances of increasing global interdependency, there is a need for European Union countries to work towards an in-depth understanding of Asia. At the same time, Asia needs to develop a better understanding of the EU and its complexity and the potential of our cooperation. After that, we think about that it's time for stimulating the interest of officials and business people, even though from Asia and European Union, to return to the traditional areas of great importance. On the other hand, it proposed public awareness of the opinion, especially of a new generation, that you think there is a lack of understanding on the academia level of this area on the importance of Asia, but also in Asia it is possible to promote more about European Union values, where relevant developments are taking place with a very global impact. And we have also other 4 aims that is already mentioned here on the slides: reducing tension among various EU countries and countries from Asia, to facilitate communication and cooperation, and of course, related to these major challenges that are currently Russia-Ukraine crisis and pandemic issue, but after that, resuming direct institutional and human contact. Yeah, the next slide. So here is the motivation. What do you think about is needed to launch the Asia Century project? The 19th century was a European one. After that, 20th century was American century, and now 21st century is going to be Asiatized. That we think about it's time to analyze more deeply the Asia continent as a whole. Even though my expertise is related to the Middle East, you can include it here as a Western Asia. Please go next slide. So, based on the motivation related to the economic side, I would like to show you these figures and graphics that show how is moving the economic center of gravity. And you see 18th century out of 20th century belongs to Asia side. So we see, and I think there is a restoration, not a revolution, to being back in Asia to study and to deal with, especially in economic side with Asia. This. Related to how it's moving the center of gravity, somewhere in currently, I can say 2015 is presented on the slide, but currently somewhere in Iran. In 2007 was supposed to be in Izmir, somewhere in Turkey. It is moving towards east annually, roughly with 100 kilometers. We expected that by 2015 to be somewhere between India and China. This is an estimation. But anyway, related to the economic side, we are thinking there is an increase on this demand to be studied, how we could engage in with Asia countries, please. Here are few figures that we will analyze, discussing about Asia rise. So more than half of the world population, and by 2014, more than 50% of world GDP we have in Asia, nearly 40% of global consumption. Related to PPP, in terms, already China is the bigger economy, overcoming US, and we expected that GDP, in terms of GDP, China will overcome US maybe by 2013. Besides this, there is a challenge that we should also be aware what will be in the political dimension in Asia, or how will develop political dimension in Asia, but also in security terms. We consider that Asia is still as a fractured politically and grows more so with the rise of great power competition. The question here, maybe you address, or as a rhetoric question, will Asia step into this political leadership gap? So we should be very frankly that besides economic growth, there is a certain question that's how Asia will lead international world order, if you can say, besides economic, politically, in security terms. Please go further. It is a few figures. When you look at Asia as a continent, there is 4 types of approaches: advanced Asia economy, China, emerging Asia, frontier Asia, and India. There is a figure, since I do not want to go deeply in details here. Please go ahead. I would like also to introduce, because Turkey is one of our Romania major strategic partner, what foreign minister said last year in the framework of Ankara Diplomatic Forum. He stressed that there is a reality that everyone now sees the Asian reality. The 21st century will be Asia century. So we are thinking about that is awareness that even though Turkey as a linkage between Europe and Asia is going to have this kind of assessment, and they already launched a project themselves to tackle Asia economy, especially. Please go ahead. We divided Asia in order to much better tackle the whole issue in 5 main sub-regions. You already see here, and what is my interest is related to Western Asia, that we call also Middle East. So here we can start the discussion how Asia countries see Middle East. Some of them, they are using much more the term referring as Western Asia. But of course, as a short conclusion here, China has taken a lead with the Belt and Road Initiative across the Asia, but is not leading alone. Go forward. related to Middle East, because that's, as I already mentioned, we're facing also an ASEANization process in Middle East countries. At least 11 Middle East countries has a major trade partner, China, but also their economy is facing, working also more closer with Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. Of course, we didn't talk nothing about India. There is a sleepy giant with its own interest in the Indian Ocean. The main driver still, maybe also during this crisis, will still as energy, but also we can go beyond in agriculture or other sector, technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, and so on. Please go ahead. Our activities related to this project is mentioned here, so you have in the paper. We try to identify as much as possible common interest with Asia countries, and that was the idea, to invite many countries from Asia, especially of course Middle East side, Western Asia, and ASEAN, East Asia, Central Asia, to participate in this event, to identify our common interest, to work together to overcome certain challenges. We try to develop different material studies and books to publish in the media in order to remove this misperception about the region, initiating an international project and working together at the level of think tanks, especially not necessarily the governmental level, but we encourage a think tanks discussion and building this kind of sustainable networks in between EU and Asia. Please. And also we invite to rediscover the value of the diplomacy. I already mentioned the classical diplomacy, parliamentary diplomacy, culture, public diplomacy, cyber, and peace and conflict diplomacy. And as a conclusion, I'll be very short because I invite also to think about maybe during the session, the Q&A session, to discuss this question. The world is ready for Asia first. What happens when Asia no longer just produces for the West, but the West produces for Asia? Is Western society getting ready to see the world and the future from the Asia point of view? How is an Asia-led international order? In which states, both in and out of Asia, cooperate and benefit? Here, there is a certain doubts related to the military dimension, especially security issue and political one, as I already stressed this before. Asia as a whole has internal obstacle to the achievement of the new Asia-led international order. Power, in their case, is very essential. So, my question is the final thoughts before letting Professor Anis to deliver his speech. What about the security architecture in the Asia? How would be referred to this one? Similar to Europe, or what type of security architecture you can give us as a example or your thoughts related to this issue? Thank you very much, and I will give the floor to Professor Mureșan.
Thank you. Will help us also for the discussion, but also for a better understanding of the project we are now launching. We have the privilege to have as a special guest and first speaker, Professor Anis Bajretarevic. He has a tremendous career as professor and also in international organizations, very active initiatives, books, articles, very active on social media, and somebody which we discovered that it's a real driving force for the new ideas, and so we were very happy that he accepted to not only to come to Bucharest with your spouse. Thank you very much for coming, but also for working to the project. I want to thank with this opportunity also our colleague General Corneliu Tivariu for his contribution to the preparation of the ideas, on launching the ideas of this project and the cooperation with AIES and IFIMES, prestigious network. So we have also there it's a special Politburo here. It's Adrian Severin, and you see also it's not easily a young wing, not more young wing. Alexander Georgescu, they will have their intervention. But the first one, the icebreaker, so it's Professor Andris Baliterovich. You have the floor. Thank you so much.
See that the word Politburo gets back to fashion. Good morning here today.
Closer to the mic.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, Neely. Good day to everyone. I'm particularly happy to talk in front of actually two foreign ministers from the Romanian side and distinguished serving Austrian minister Werner Vaslav. Thank you, Thank you, Corneliu. I know Corneliu for many years. We are pen friends, I think, for nearly 2 decades. Thanks. It's a great honor to be here. Excellencies also and distinguished representatives from the embassies. It's really impressive since I live in Vienna, and Vienna claims to have the eldest diplomatic academy in the world. And when you have 5 ambassadors in the audience, they're very happy today. Far stronger presence of Excellency ambassadors and other distinguished representatives from the embassy. So it's really very impressive. And I'm delighted to talk to you today. So basically, my touch with Asia starts with actually one of the starts is with the article of the naughty name. You know, everybody was prophesizing the Asian century. So the logics was telling, okay, the 19th century was the century of Great Britain, 20th century was Pan-Americana, the American century, and then the 21st century would be the Asian century. And then you know, so I tried to think of the contra-narrative, of course, you know. So and then I published the first version of the essay, which was later becoming very rare. And the essay was very brief, no Asian century. And then I was giving the argumentation what Asia has to do in order to have its own century. Come very soon to that. So it was published, I think, 12 years ago. It's in the meantime, it's translated. It is translated in all relevant Asian languages. It was on the website of the Australian Prime Minister, so it's published in over 50 countries, and in which actually I gave the argumentation. So just in a brief nutshell, up to the 15th century, as we know it, so Europe was basically nothing but a peninsular periphery of the huge landmass called Asia. And then with so-called grand discoveries, the shift of the peripheral, at that time very peripheral, very neuralgic, very primitive and aggressive Europe, actually the shift of gravity has changed. And then this was marking, of course, gradually. Now in history, everything looks like sudden, but it was a gradual shift. So from the 15th century up to practically nowadays, that was something which I describe in my writings as an anthropogeographic inversion, in which actually peripheries became center and center became periphery. You know, in the cultural, in economic, even in demographic sense. What does it mean? That means that the natural geographic and cultural centers like Central Asia, even if you want to mainland China, Afghanistan, Iran, Middle East, Syria, Damascus as the longest permanently urbanized place on earth. You know? So those places which were at the center in the civilization, in the geographic sense, they became peripherized, and the geographic peripheries became center. So what is the center of the world? People are today migrating from Afghanistan and from Pakistan or from Central Asia to settle where? To settle in Japan, to settle in Canada, to settle in Great Britain. If you look on the map, you will see those are the geographic peripheries. So we created a center from the geographic peripheries like Japan, like Singapore, like South Korea, South Africa, Canada, United States, Great Britain. Those are the centers of the world from 15th century gradually on to today. And something which is a center in the civilizational sense, in the cultural sense, in the linguistic sense, in gastro sense, name it, you have it. So that became peripherals. And now with the Ukrainian war, Ukrainian war has many, let's say, issues, but also meanings. This is a visible portion of the iceberg in which actually this century of anthropogeographic inversion is getting to an end. So what the cooperation between Europe and Asia can help? Frankly speaking, I was touring Asia, for decades, and I was bringing even my students, because talking to them is different from showing them. And then in the eyes and the mouth of the young people, they are coming to me and they say, "But professor, they don't need us for anything. They have everything." And I said, "Yes, but don't tell them because they still don't know this. They are still polite. So they absolutely don't need us for them." So basically, but what is still missing, and why I express this in essay, in a political, actually, a policy paper, it's not an essay, only it's a policy paper. What is Asia missing, and what Europeans, in my honest opinion, can still contribute very much, and why you Asians should listen to us in Europe, is actually the settings, the political, military, and security settings. When we come to the organization to the articulation of interpolitical life of the continents, we will very easily notice that Europe is the most multilateralized region of the world. We will see that there is a pan-continental setting in the American continent, which is called the Organization of American States. It has asymmetries. Distinguished Flavius was mentioning, he named it sleeping giant, so it's maybe pejorative to say to India. But one of the problems of Indian subcontinent and the beautiful organization that they have, which is called SARC, is asymmetries. It's not only size of India, but it's centrality of India. Whatever you do in South Asia, you have to cross India. You can't avoid it. So those asymmetries are also existing in the American continent, but there is no centrality. So there is a gravity of Canada and the United States, but there is no centrality. You can still cooperate in the American continent, excluding, if you wish to do so, you can exclude still Canada and the United States. Africa had Organization of African Unity, now African Union. It's called African Union. It's imperfect, but it's called African Union. And when we want to see the mandate and the visions, we read the title. So it's African Union. They want to become unionistic continent. And then we come to the largest continent, to the mega demographies, to the mega economies. And then we see the striking absence of multilateral setting. They are regional setting, they are selective mechanisms, they are excellent mechanisms. ASEAN, one of them, which is in my mind closest to what we have in the European Union, especially with the model of ASEAN +3+3. There is a SARC, excellent organization. There was a CADO group, which was very specifically designed in the Far East. They are unprecedented, actually, synergies and multilateralization between Central Asian states on one side, in the center, and Russian Federation and China on the other side, with the Schengen Cooperation Organization, so many settings. There is a GCC dynamics. There are so many dynamics that are existing in Asia, but they are selective and regional. They are not pan-continental. And Asia has no place to articulate security. There is no address, as Kissinger usually used to say, so it's an old anecdote, let's inform Europe. And then Kissinger was telling, well, what is the telephone number of Europe? Give me just one telephone number to call. I have to call London, I have to call Paris, I have to call Berlin, and then Rome. And as this joke goes on, they say, okay, we have to inform London about the move, then we have to inform Paris. And then if you inform Paris, let's call Berlin. And then finally they say, okay, but let's call Rome. And they say, no, let's put in the newspapers, because as soon as we call Rome, it will be known to everyone. That's this joke. So where's the telephone number? Where's the telephone number to address the security needs? Asia is a continent, as I said, of grand economies and grand demographies. When you have expanding demography and economy, as the basic teachings of geopolitics is telling, you look for the space. And then you are coming to competing interests. Then you are stepping on the toes of others. Then you have your own agendas. And then you are driven. It's a wild horse. When you have a strong economy and strong demography, it's a wild horse that you have that consumes so much energy to control. You can't look to the neighbors. You can't articulate your neighborhood policy because you are trying to, manage this force. And there are many aspirations. The intelligence from the country is giving you different ideas. It's like being, on a wild horse. So that means there is no security sector. There is no single country in Asia. Listen to this. There is no single country in Asia that has at least 2 border disputes with each neighbors. And if you have such a security setting, you can't have your century. Period. Okay. So now to compare this with Europe, we have the multilateral institutions, and primarily I'm talking about OSCE mechanism, about the Helsinki spirit and so-called Helsinki Decalogue. What is happening now in Ukraine is a significant departure from the Helsinki, but it does not kill Helsinki. It actually reaffirms that we need Helsinki more than ever. So Asia, just very simple, Asia will have its century when Asia comes to its own Helsinki Accord, to its own Helsinki spirit. What Europeans can help, we can help with our experience. We can't teach you lesson. We can't do it for you, and we should not instruct you how to do it. So why we are relevant? Not because we are smarter, this arrogance of the big white man. No, it is because since the shift due to grand discoveries of the 15th century, as a small place, Europe is a small place. As I said, it's just a peninsula of Asia. I remember my classes in geography when I was a little boy, they said Europe is continent and India is subcontinent. And then I raised my hand to professor and I said, why Europe is continent and India is subcontinent? And then I got the look from my professor, so I knew that I should ask him. But this question remained. But in the civilizational sense and in the historical sense, we are indeed continent. So we walked our history faster. We deployed all security, mischiefs and misdeeds far faster than you. And we can't risk, the mischiefs in Asia as we had it in Europe. Asia still remains the only continent to which actually nuclear bomb has been deployed twice. And requested also during the Korean War, seriously requested. There were resignations and dismissals of certain high-rank position officers, not to go into details, because deployment of bomb was not granted in the 50s. Asia remains a whole of the largest number of the nuclear powers, out of which some are legitimate, some are so-called illegitimate. I mean, if you strictly read NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and some are declared and non-declared. Okay, so we have China and Russian Federation. So out of P5, 2 are basically there. Russia is a peripheral Asian country, and China is, so they are legitimate. They are legitimate nuclear powers. Then you have so-called illegitimate powers, which is in Indian subcontinent, India and Pakistan. Then you have North Korea, and then you have the undeclared power, nuclear power, which is on the far edge of Asian continent, the West Asia, which is Israel. And it is believed that they have a low power to around 200 nuclear warheads. So they are illegitimate in a way and undeclared, because Israel never declared officially that they are nuclear bombs. And then at least in the Far East, we have one country which has turnkey technology. So physically, technically, they don't have a bomb. but they can create it in a matter of weeks. I think you know which country at least one country I mentioned. And then in the Western Asia, we have a clear aspirations, and Iran is not the only country that is also aspiring to have at least to come to the point of turnkey technology. So that means it's not only the bomb, but it's also delivery systems. Because having, bomb does not mean much if you don't have a credible delivery system. So that means you have to master the rocket science. And we have, at least in the West Asia, we have power. What does it mean? There are some junior, some senior powers. That means actually that the MED, mutual assurance destruction, does not play. Because in the history of wars, D1 that is on a hill and D1 that actually makes a surprise attack has a premium in the war, has an upper hand in the war. And then with the so-called mutual assurance destruction doctrine, if you have enough configurations and quantities of the nuclear weaponry, nobody will win. So Americans assured Russian Soviets, and the Soviets assured Americans, we can absorb your first shock. However, you can surprise us with the nuclear attack. We will retaliate by absorbing the shock and retaliating. So we have enough configurations and quantities to make a retaliation. And that made, in this peculiar, very strange way, that made actually a data when they realized. But in Asia, this actually mutual assurance destruction is missing because they are so-called junior nuclear powers, incapacitated for the absorption of the first shock. That means that actually a drive for the surprise nuclear attack exists. So having all this in mind, we can't say that there is an Asian century without this. So just closing right now. So basically, in my mind, in my modest mind, what Europe can still be very helpful to Asia is actually the architecture of multiculturalism, of actually sitting with you and telling us about our experiences, how to create a truly pan-continental settings of multiculturalism, pan-continental institutions, of true multilateralism, in which big and small can safely sit and work. So we have many problems in Brussels. There are many critics of the EU. There are many critics of Council of Europe. There are many critics of the sleeping giant. I would say OSCE is a sleeping giant right now. It's absent in a way. Okay, but still, it does not mean that the spirit and the idea is bad or it's outdated. Is relevant more than ever, especially the Helsinki Decalogue. So just to tell you, for those of you who are not knowing much about the OSCE, OSCE has a unique structure. So it's a mutual recognition of borders with the Geneva Conference in Helsinki 75, and then it came actually to so-called three baskets. It's a political-military cooperation with the confidence building measures, with the joint inspections, and so on and so forth. There is economic, environmental dimension, and there is so-called human rights dimension, or human rights and humanitarian law dimension. So this is a unique setting which actually gathers entire Europe, and it relaxed tensions because there was a mutual recognition of borders. I just give you examples. So there is one of the border disputes between Thailand and Cambodia. Okay, and it includes also the holy sites. So there is no way that either side will give up, because if, for example, Thais are giving territorial concession to Cambodians, the government would fail. They would be treated as a state treason. Okay, so there is no way that would go. But we had it already in Europe. In Alsace and Lorraine, in the places, for example, in France and Germany, where thousands and thousands of people died, for every inch, every meter of the territory. There was no way in a bilateral setting that the countries would recognize the border of the existing line. But when you do it, a mutual recognition of borders of everyone, that's far easy. And that's actually the spirit of Helsinki. And this is something which was actually the big achievement. And again, not because we Europeans were smarter than you Asians. It's because we simply, due to the circumstances and the small close proximity of protagonists in Europe. Asia is so big. but we are slow. Okay, so we walked our history far faster. And if you want me to describe, to draw the parallel, where is Asia today? Asia today is where Europe was, I don't know, around Berlin Congress or shortly after Berlin Congress. So in the security settings, in the multilateralization, in the thinking and the philosophy of articulation of interstate relations, we are at least 120 years ahead of you. And that is actually something that in my modest mind we can help you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You understand that today on the map of Europe there are two important cities, Bucharest and Brussels. In Brussels are three summits, G7, NATO and European Council, with ideas about new world order, and we see here in Bucharest we are trying to elaborate about the future of Asia and how we have to perceive this not sleeping giant. It's awake and it starts to move. So I just want to invite our colleague, Professor Werner Fassladen, to take the floor. He's speaking from Vienna. He's president of the Austrian Institute for Strategic Studies, and known also as a former Minister of Defense of Austria and leading Austrian EuroDefense and so on. And thank you so much, Werner, accepting to have an intervention to our event. You have the floor. Bitte.
So, first of all, I want to thank President Cavamaria and, of course, also Livio Mureșan for inviting me to take part at this conference. And I'm very happy to see also old friends like Adrian and many others in this round to discuss about, well, the Asian century. And I would like, to continue immediately what Cavamaria and Bayraktarovic already tried to line out, maybe from a little different point of view. In our institute, we are not discussing about the Asian century. We are not discussing and talking about continental questions, but rather more about geostrategic regions. And therefore, we call it not the Asian century, but the Indo-Pacific century. Because if we look back to history, you have to say it was not the continent that defined the center of the world. In antiquity, this was the Mediterranean area. In the north, European countries, in the South African countries, and in the east, Asian countries. And this changed only after the discovery of America, around about half a millennium ago. And the center of gravity changed from the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean, and especially the northern Atlantic Ocean. At the beginning, it was rather the southern part, with the dynamics of Spanish and Portuguese discoveries and colonial activities and so on. And this lasted until, you could say, the end of the 20th century. At the beginning, as it was said, it was in the 19th century, certainly the European countries that dominated. In the 20th century, it became the United States. But with the beginning of the 21st century, we are confronted by sure with a new epoch, with a new era, you could say. And this is, for me, the Indo-Pacific area. Why Indo-Pacific? Of course, there's a little bit of political discussion also, whether this is more China-minded or American-minded. We thought in our institute that we did not. We are using it already for around about 10 years. And we do so because what we see is, that not the continent as such is important, but this whole region consisting out of the Indian Ocean and the western part of the Pacific Ocean. This belongs together. And whether this is southern or western or eastern or southeastern Asia, whether this is Australia, Oceania, or also Eastern Africa, you have to look at it as one big, one greater region. And this will be decisive because practically all the dynamics you can see are happening over there. And I start with the demographics. Of course, this is more or less the basis for everything else. I mean, if you just look to the situation already now, there are around about 5 billion people living within this region. And also the demographic dynamics are going over there. It's not the same thing everywhere. I mean, if you look to the world map, you have to say Europe and China and East Asia are stagnating. America is increasing a little bit. Africa and especially South Asia, but also Western Asia and Southeast Asia are exploding. And this certainly is defining the dynamics in a way, not only demographically, but also politically, economically, due to security policy, but also in the sense of technology and culture, the dynamics are over there. And what I see and what I think, is the main reason for occupying ourselves much, much more than we did in the past, that because this is not only the decisive developments for the future world order, but it's also the decisive question for Europe's role in the world. Our role and our standards will depend absolutely from the developments over there. And what we have to look at is, that the development is extremely fast and it is comprehensive, as I said, because it comprehends practically every aspect from politics to technology. So far, what we can see now is, of course, on the one hand, this enormous rise of China that also brought the question of the future number one in the world, whether it will be America or China on the global table. Certainly in economic terms, this is a question that has been more or less been already decided in favor of China, due also to the fact that, of course, China is the biggest nation with 1.4 billion people, and you could not compare it with anybody else because it is also very homogeneous. This is one thing. On the other hand, we see, that in this Indo-Pacific region, there's not only one giant, but also another one, even if it is still a sleeping giant, and this is India. In a few years, India will be the number one demographically, and at the end of the century, it will have around about 1.6 billion people, and you will see that also the economic and political dynamics will go over there. Why? Because, of course, also this enormous rise of those two nations are changing the world. Why? I mean, if you look to the history of China, you have to say this always used to be a more or less terrestrially oriented country. It never was a sea power without a very short exception, I would say, Everybody is aware of that. But most of the time, it was concentrated on terrestrial questions at the Asian neighborhood. But by its enormous rise now, it has become not only a global power that, of course, already has influenced more than anybody else. The whole African continent is very influential also in Latin America and in big parts, not only in Asia, but also even in Europe. Okay. What it meant is, of course, that it had also to concentrate not only on terrestrial questions, but also on sea questions. This was more or less the reason for development, the OBOR, the Belt and Road Initiative. And if you look to the fact, there is this general rule, why the maritime factor is so important, even for somebody that is coming from a landlocked country like Austria, is the fact that, okay, more than 2/3, around about 70% of the world are covered by the sea. 80% of mankind are living within a distance of only 100 miles away from a coast, and 90% of world trade are going by sea. And therefore, of course, there is enormous change that was necessary. But this certainly also is changing the geostrategic situation. And I do not want to go into the relationship between America and China, but just if you look to the Asian continent, you have to say, that if you look to the geostrategic situation of India, of course, in the north you have, as the big neighbor is China, but by OBOR on the one hand, by the Pakistan corridor in the at the western side, and the Myanmar corridor at the eastern side, of course, you have a situation that is changing the geostrategic situation, not only of China, but also of India fundamentally. And it is also changing fundamentally the geostrategic situation of Southeast Asia. And therefore, it is not only a question, of economic rights, because not only China has such a rise, but so many nations, not only the BRICS, but also the so-called Next 11s. If you look at that, almost all of them, or let me say 70%, or more than 70%, are located in the Indo-Pacific area. Then you can see that there is the whole dynamic. And of course, this also means that the security question will come up on the table. It is not just by chance, that now you have not only the biggest military budgets, the biggest military expenses and so on from the increase in this area, whether this is China or this is India or this is the Arab countries and so on, you can name it. But you can see that the dynamic is over there. You also can see that the nuclear question, of course, with North Korea, India and Pakistan being relatively new nuclear powers, Israel, of course, also situated in this situation, in this greater region. There are open questions. And when we are talking now, and I hope we will find an end pretty soon in Vienna, also the question whether Iran should become a nuclear state, of course, is a question out of this region. And therefore, we have to concentrate on all the developments and also on all the changes that are going on. They are so fundamentally. And if you look, in how many aspects those countries are already leading countries, technologically leading, whether this is China or Japan or South Korea or others, you can see, there is the new development. And therefore, the question will be, if you look to the land, if you look to the map, you can see that, well, from the eastern, or let me say, from the western part of the Pacific Ocean, the coasts of Japan and China and Korea, down through Southeast Asia, around India, going through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, you have more or less an Asian lifeline. An Asian lifeline, because this means this is the lifeline they need, you know, in order to import not only energy, but also raw materials, many, at least many out of them. And it's also the lifeline for markets. But we have to become aware this is not only the Asian lifeline, this will be the European lifeline, because all our big markets, whether this is China or Japan or Southeast Asia or India, will be over there. Also, the question of energy now, maybe especially interesting as part of the discussions of the last days due to the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Of course, this energy dependency, regional dependency, certainly is there and will be there. And the question will be whether Europe will be able to take part in this enormous development that is going on in this region. And therefore, and I'm now coming to an end, I really want to thank you for this initiative. I think, you know, it is worthwhile, not only worthwhile, but absolutely necessary to occupy ourselves much, much more. It's not only our surroundings. It's not only the question how far Europe is going. It's not only a question of our immediate neighborhood in Northern Africa and in the Middle East, but this certainly will influence not only Europe's development, but also Europe's fate. And this probably not only in the 21st century, but far beyond, because you can see that the dynamics will hold on, whether they come now from Southeast Asia or from South Asia, maybe in the future also from big parts of Africa and so on. So far, I'm really glad. I want to thank you for this initiative, and I hope we will be able, you know, to have a very intense discussion on all those subjects. Thank you very much also for your attention.
Thank you, Minister Faslan. Thank you so much. And, I just want to remember we have to thank also Anis and Minister Faslan because they are representing two institutions which accepted and we as the partnership for this project. So IFIMES and AIES from Vienna are already from the beginning the partners of our project. So thank you very much for your presentation, and hoping to see you soon in Bucharest, in Vienna, or in Asia somewhere. I don't know.
That's right.
Yeah, and I just want to invite Minister Tudor Meleshkanu. He's somewhere in the clouds.
I am in the cloud. Do you hear me?
Yes, it's from better as from the space station. Yeah. Minister,
Okay.
you have the floor. Professor Meleshkanu, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, I'm very grateful for you and for the excellent idea of having such an important meeting, because I'm very direct. Usually the Eastern European countries were looking during the last period of time, we were all looking to the Western part of Europe. finally, the European Union is working. And from this point of view, I think the top priority of Romania is to also look at the East, because from all the points of view, in the Arab countries, in the Central Asia, there is a very clear pillar which is organized in order to build and to develop the economy of the international relations. In this part of the world, you have the oil, you have the gas, you have a lot of possibilities for arranging and developing the institutions. Now, I do not ignore the fact that during our presidency of the European Council in 2019, one of our top priorities was to start discussing, having a dialogue and developing our relations between the European Union, Romania being the presidential, yes, it's more important. And we started really to work very seriously about our relations during the 6 months of our presidency. First of all, the first one, we arranged together with with other countries. For the first time, we organized a summit, European Union, peste 10 minute. Da, că sunt în discuție, da. Ok. Sorry, I have an, okay. As I said, one of the first priority for us was to establish, to organize a first summit between the European Union and the League of the Arab States. Irrespective of the relations between all these countries in the Middle East, it's obvious that it is one of the top priorities. When we speak about energy, energy is in the Arab world, and the rest in the Central Asia, it's obvious this should be top priorities for us. The process of negotiating a project of the Council also included some conclusions about the Iran and the fact that Iran and Syria were top priorities, and we did our best in order to use this possibility. What is happening now, what is moving from my point of view, I realized that this week, 2 days ago, we had a meeting. We realized there was a meeting between Egypt, the Arab Emirates, and Israel in Sharm el-Sheikh, and they really had a very important discussion about the future of this part of the world. It is obvious that all these countries they are heavy countries, not small countries. But what we can do and what should be our main preoccupation is to try to put together different Arab countries, different countries from the Central Asia, and to try to develop systems which will permit to have for Romania to bring their knowledge about the development of these countries. And from this point of view, I think that the top is for us the Emirates, the Emirates. Yes, it's a very strong relationship in the economic field and in the political field. Egypt, of course, is one of our main, let's say, those who are buying wood from Romania. There is a very close relationship with Egypt, and with Israel there is no need, as it is 10% of the population is represented by immigrants from Romania. All these issues are really giving a different vision. Yes, we have now, with the war in Ukraine, with the eastern border of NATO and all these issues, but we have to look at the future. And in the future, our future is to have a very strong relationship with the Arab countries and Central Asian countries. We can do it. We have an important experience in Romania in the transition from autocracy to democracy. All these things are very important for us. More than that, a lot of them had the possibilities to study in Romania on different universities, and all these important persons are now in connection with us. That's why I'm trying to conclude. We have to look at not only to the West, we have to look to the East. And the East is the future. And the future represents for Romania one of our top priorities in our foreign policy. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Minister, accepting to have this intervention. And we have full understanding that behind all the personalities, they are queuing the mass media, which is trying to have the interviews, the live radio, TV channels, and so on, due to the importance of personalities also of the topic. Thank you so much. And Minister Adrian Severin, thank you so much accepting to stay with us despite this program, which is a little bit so flexible, and we were obliged to try to accommodate international agenda. So you have the floor, Minister. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I have to apologize from the outset because I'm going to leave immediately after I deliver a few ideas on this topic. I'm so sorry about that. But anyhow, I'm happy that I could still address you on this important issue and on this important day, because indeed I will pick up what you have just said. Today we have in Europe and in the world two important events. One is this one, and the other one in Brussels. President Biden is going to speak about not the century of Asia, but about the new century of the United States. So there are two approaches, two visions, and it is extremely important, to think from these two perspectives. I remember that at the beginning of the 20th century, I believe, a theory was that the sun is going from the east towards the west, and the same way and the same direction has the march of civilization from the east towards the west. So since the earth is round, I believe that in this march westwards, we are now reaching back the east, the origins of the civilization, and indeed Asia is at the origin of the civilization. Perhaps it is a very divided continent, as you said, Professor, but I remember that the history of Europe is a history which of the dilemma or of the fights between unification and fragmentation. Whenever we try to unite, we ended by being fragmented. And to a certain extent, we owe Asia the conscience of our unity. Because, for instance, we were Christians, unlike the Ottomans, unlike the Ottoman Empire, which was the enemy of Europe, so to say, and we define ourselves as being not Muslims as the Ottomans were. So this was the first time, I believe, when the Europeans had their conscience in fighting against Islam. And we became united because the others were against us and united us, unified us. At the same time, indeed, I have at my heart the OSCE, since I was the president of the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, and since the process of OSCE is very dear to me. Even yesterday, I attended a conference of the OSCE, of course, on the very topical issue, which is the war in Ukraine. But I must say that we reached the unity in Europe because after centuries of fights between the Europeans. So what I would say is that anyhow, when speaking about Asia century, we should not look to Asia with our read area, with our Euro-Atlantic eyeglasses. And I remember what you said, it's correct very much, and reminded me about the Black Sea area as a region. So the great powers having interest in the Black Sea area, they looked to the Black Sea as homogeneous, to say so, or as a coherent region. But we, the riparians, we didn't see the Black Sea region as being our common region. We were in fight with each other. We still are in fight with each other, and more or less in this area and around the Black Sea. So probably sometimes we are going to understand that this is a region for the riparians. For the time being, it is more a region for the global powers or regional powers having interest in this area. So the same goes to my mind with Asia. We are speaking about Asia as a unity, since we have unique interests there, and our interests are sometimes conflicting there. It is a time, and I'm sure that with the time, the countries in that region will understand that they are a region and they have to build together some kind of a future. But it is for them to find these ways, and I doubt that it is our duty or our right to teach them the way to follow. They are going, I'm sure, to find their own way, their specific way, as we found our specific way. Thinking about the previous centuries, we had a European century, or even more centuries of Europe, because the history was slower in the past. Now the century is fast. So, dear friends in Asia, be careful. The history is running fast, so you are not going to have more than a century. But we as Europeans, we had several centuries. And what was those centuries? During those centuries, we have built a world order, a global order, according to our culture. This was a starting point. Our culture. And what was our culture? Our Christian culture. Our culture, or even not Christian, Judeo-Christian, Judo culture, with a savior, with a promised land, with the table of commands. So we addressed the world and we said, look, we are your saviors, you, including the Asian countries, I don't know, Persia and China and whoever, India, we are, or Arabic states, we are your saviors. So you have just to follow our commands, and you'll have the happiness, the paradise. You are going to get the paradise. So this was in the center of our culture, or our model of a world order. And we were able to impose that order because we had the power. We had the power. We had the military power. We had the economic power. We have the demographic power at the time. We had, did I say military, economic, political power. So the power allowed us to impose the others our model of international order. And thus, that was basically a colonial order, very bad to my mind, as bad as the very unwise way in which decolonization took place. In fact, when we decolonized, we the Europeans, let me put it like that, when we decolonized, we thought, how could we preserve, how could we go on with our order? Formally, we said, okay, you are free, but on the other hand, we were trying to keep our rules of the game, as our friend Mr. Biden is trying to do now. He says, okay, we are looking for a new order. What was the old order he wants to replace? Well, the old order was the American order. It was a Pax Americana. So it is America after America. This is the draft, the proposal of President Biden, which I fully understand. If I were the American president, I wouldn't have done differently, because it's obvious America was power, or the global power, the supreme power, and no supreme power would like to give up, to cease being a supreme power. The problem is what is the offer? The question is what is the offer this power has in order to claim that after its order will come also its order, a different one, but also consistent with its own culture. To my mind, and if we compare the power, the aggregated power of the Asiatic players in all terms, economic, demographic, and so on and so forth, well, we can see that the power is there already. And from that point of view, I'm looking towards the Asia century. The Asia century. The Asia century, okay, after the European model, which was a colonial model, we had a different model, anti-colonial model, which was the American one, with free trade, with the global army, with rule of law, with democracy, while the Western democracy or Atlantic democracy, and so on and so forth. So it was the American dream, and the American dream, together with the American army and with the American dollar, they were able to conquer the world. They were able to impose their vision on the global order to the world. To my mind, the American dream, number one, is not any more as attractive as it used to be. And in any case, the American dream was betrayed by the Americans themselves, and which is very bad for everybody. And eventually, America has not strength enough, not power enough in order to defend or to promote a new American dream, which is not yet defined. I don't know what is going, to forward to deliver President Biden as the definition of the new American dream, which should be at the origin of the new American order. So, under these circumstances, I believe that there we are with the century of Asia. And when I'm trying to foresee what about this century, I can first and foremost, and I should think to the culture of the Asiatic countries, which is diverse, but at the same time has a number of common features. And I believe that multilateralism against the unilateralism is such a feature. I believe that harmony of the world against the balance of powers and the division and the, let's say, domination, it's a feature of this culture, of these countries, all of them, because for centuries these countries were powerless, while for centuries we Europeans and they, our cousins in America, they were powerful. So we are going to see, I believe, this is my guess, countries which have the culture of harmony because they didn't have power, in order to using their power to promote an order which perhaps will be characterized by the multilateralism, by the sake of or the care for harmony, for equilibrium, for and perhaps also for some austerity, because we, unfortunately, the Euro-Atlantic civilization, we are now used with welfare, a lot of welfare. So when the Asian countries, they are not used with the same welfare as we are used. So they might suggest a different model of development based on austerity rather than an economy, rather than on credit and loans and so on. So I'll stop here. And by saying what? Again, I'm saying that, to my mind, I repeat, it's neither our duty nor our right to tell the Asian countries, the Asian nation, what to do. But it's our interest, I believe, to look carefully on the the processes which are process which is going on there, and which speaks that the culture of Asia, whatever this culture is, and the power of Asia will promote an order to which we will be not able to resist, an order which will be not able to refuse. And if we cannot refuse that order, If we cannot stop this process, we have to join that process. It is in our interest because we are not definitely not interested, I believe, in being integrated within a culture which is not necessarily our culture. I don't say that it's a bad one. I don't say that it's a culture which we might not like, but it is not ours. So I hope that the Asia, starting from its inclination towards harmony, will, if we are wise enough and we take the right position, we would develop a century which will be not against our culture, but which will integrate our culture in a more synthetical view of the world order. So, and from that point of view, I believe that this initiative is extremely interesting. The initiative you are launching today, and I think that we will have plenty, we should have plenty of opportunities to talk about that, to try to define what does the Asia century mean after the European century and after the American century, and how could we integrate our history and our life and our way of living and thinking within the concept which will be included in the Asian culture. So, and I hope that we'll be able to not only to speak about what are our expectations or our fears, but also to listen to the people from Asia to tell us which are their aspirations and which is their concept on the future of the world order. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You are in a hurry.
Sorry.
To answer the questions. Okay. It's not possible to answer the questions, I understand. We not yet received from Brussels, but only from Bucharest.
I can stay only 5 minutes.
I have already one question. Somebody, just one question, please. Don't miss the opportunity to put one question. Professor Liliana Popescu, please, you have the microphone. Thank you. Very short question and very sharp question, very short answer. Thank you.
Minister Severin, I would like to ask you whether you are suggesting that we should go back before the Westphalia peace when you are talking about the world order. The actual world order is based on sovereign states. And this is my question. It's very short. Thank you.
Well, I don't think, and I don't see for the time being, how could we give up the idea of sovereignty and of equal sovereignty. The sovereignty is included in the Westphalian peace, of course, and that was at the end of the 30 years, I believe, religious wars. And I think that also what we see in Asia, there are different nations, different people, different religions, different languages, and so on. But as we, as Europeans, in our diversity, have something in common, I'm sure that the Asian culture, which is formed by the Indian culture, by the Chinese culture, by the Indonesian culture, by, say it, the Iranian culture, which is a Persian culture in our history, by the Arabic culture, and so on and so forth. I think that they certainly are able to remain and willing to remain diverse, different, and at the same time, they are at a certain point in time, they will find ways to unite in a way within a frame of common security, of common welfare, and things like that. Because afterwards, I believe that the human beings all over the world, they are looking for welfare, of course, for dignity as well. But dignity and prosperity and security, all this. So the human beings everywhere are looking for the same thing. They are looking for peace and any order. However, we define the order as a single goal, and this is a peace. Peace within which we can reach prosperity, we can have dignity, we can have security, stability, and so on. So the model of the order is different. Well, the time being, I'm not sure that we could predict what this Asia century would suggest as the new order. But it's clear that from there we can just have some indications. But I'm sure that there is now the origin of the new draft. So we'll see. We'll see.
Thank you so much.
If I may, just a second before,
Okay.
just a second before Excellency. Here we have diplomats from Asian countries, and we should help them how to report to their capitals what is happening today. So just to contextualize things, so what is discussed here. So why Romania matters? It's a little country in Eastern Europe, and then you are reporting, back to capital, you have to sell a little Romania or little Austria. So why it matters? So here and it's usually, the line of talks in the plenaries, you bring, representatives from small African or from Asian countries, and you talk about big China. I always repeat to my students and to everyone, Asia is larger than China, India, and Japan. Middle East is larger than Egypt and Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Israel. It's larger than that. Those are important countries, but it's larger than that. So to contextualize how to live as a smaller country in Asia with the giants, how to live one system and then the other system. Romania is really the first address you can cut. Romania has no history of invading, occupying, big colonial power, but still it managed and survived as a culture and as a singular state entity. And Austria also is relevant because it's a small country, but it was the principal power up to Napoleonic Wars. It was the major power of Europe, or therefore the world. Indirectly, it was also controlling the Spanish crown. So therefore, when reporting, back to your capitals, actually, that makes a sense because we are together thinking and revisiting the important chapters of history of our experiences in order actually, so by helping this project or these ideas, you are helping yourself. How to articulate interest and exactly a concept of Asia together with a big, no matter of the size of economy or demography or your position in Asia. That's actually to contextualize. And therefore initiative comes from Romania. Romania was a communist country, which means it lived one system and it shifted to another system. So it knows, it has its own experiences playing basketball and also football. While the West, with the full appreciation, only played one game all the time. So therefore it's relevant, and experiences are happening there. So I felt like intervening.
So thank you so much, and thank you so much, Minister Severin, for your intervention, for your understanding. And as you mentioned, Professor Panicterovic, I think that the best speaker for building this bridge between Europe and Asia in the practice and in the studies and promoting this cooperation, is Ambassador Viorel Stichoia Budura. He's a career diplomat. He's a former ambassador of Romania in Republic of China, Mongolia, Korea. He was also head of Asia Pacific Department of the European External Action Service and ambassador of EU in Japan. So, and thank you so much, Ambassador Stichoia, that you accepted to be from the beginning part of the starting of this project of Asia's century. You have the floor, and sorry for this delay in the moment of your intervention.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the very generous introduction. I hope you can hear me properly. Unfortunately, I could not join you on the ground in that beautiful hotel. But in spirit, I'm together with you. And I hope my intervention will rather support and confirm many of the assessments and ideas which already have been presented. I would say I'm not only honored to join this very meaningful project, but also the debate which is opening this important chapter. I believe it's a timely debate, and at the same time, if you've been so kind to stress, President Mureșan, it's in the moment when we have a wake-up call. It might be the war in Ukraine, the actions of the Russians over there. It might be the wake-up call which would be delivered today by President Biden, or the signals which might be delivered by all the European leaders gathered in the European Council's meeting. But I believe all in all might mean something which means rebalancing in the global order, in the way in which we as Europeans, us as Romanians, would foresee what we can do. And talking about our future in the framework of foreseeing an Asian century, it's something which may offer a lot of food for thought. You've been kind to mention my previous experience, President Mureșan, and it's true, proudly, I served a number of years as head of Asia and Pacific Department in the European External Action Service from the very beginning of this new European institution in 2011. And then I spent more than 30 years on the ground in Asian countries, including just before concluding my career as the European Union ambassador to Japan. What I have seen, and that's following a number of legitimate remarks made in the framework of our debate, I've noticed on the ground over there, and also from Brussels, that the EU was not doing so bad in connecting itself with the helpful collective efforts of the member states with Asian partners. I'm saying that because I joined in 2011, and the first task was to start negotiations for the free trade agreements with a number of major trade partners in Asia, except China. And you can imagine why is an exception given the complexity of the EU-China trade relations, which incidentally has grown last year over 25%, reaching more than $800 billion under difficult circumstances. But still, that has happened, showing the mutual interest. On the other side, as I was saying, from 2011, then for a decade, the European Union, with the collective contribution of the member states under the competencies of the Trade Department of the European Commission, has negotiated more than a dozen of free trade agreements, connecting itself and giving a stimulating and favorable trade framework for the member states in developing trade and economic exchanges and cooperation with Asian states. And I should briefly recall a number of them, mention a number of these agreements, like the economic partnership with Japan, the one with Singapore, Vietnam, Australia, New Zealand, ROK, Republic of Korea, South Korea, and many others still under negotiations. One quite challenging and difficult is with India. India was mentioned so many times, and it shows once again that by its magnitude, the complexity of its domestic agenda and its national policies, negotiating with India, it's not an easy exercise, as it is also with China. And you may remember that in spite of finalizing negotiations almost 2 years ago with China on a bilateral investment agreement, that was not completed and not politically agreed by the European Parliament. That's something missing, because with China, we do not have anything in terms of bilateral agreements since 1985. And you can easily compare what it represented in those days, 85, China, in the overall framework of the global economy, and what it is now, and what we may need to have as a shaped agreement, a framework of the EU relations with China. But I was saying that since 2011 till now, a number of trade agreements have been finalized, some others under negotiations, almost with all ASEAN members, Asia, Southeast Asian nations, 10 Asians over there, but also with other major partners, as I was saying, Japan, Australia, Indonesia, etc. Besides, as a sort of framing the bilateral relations and offering the platform to the member states for operating and having wider exchanges with Asian partners, a number of political agreements were coupled with the trade and economic agreements. Then very wise policy developed in the last decade by the European Union, by the European Commission, and also by the institution in which I played a certain role, the European External Action Service. Political agreements, either partnership agreements embodying a number of basic principles of mutually respecting sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and so on. And a few political agreements, so-called framework participation agreement, which in plain language mean that these countries, like ROK, Australia, Vietnam, may Japan under negotiations, a similar agreement, may join European Union in operations across the world, either post-crisis management operation, peacekeeping operations. Many, I wonder if how many of distinguished panelists or those in the audience know about this kind of agreements which the European Union has agreed with Asian member states. It's not about peacekeeping under United Nations framework or authority. It's something which the European Union was able to develop under very sensitive circumstances and with very intense political dialogue and negotiations with Asian members, very much showing the mutual trust, the spirit of cooperation, the need to work together. And frankly, this is something in general which is not very well known. Besides this rather wide framework of bilateral agreements between the European Union, member states, these are not bilateral in terms of member states individually reaching bilateral agreements with individual Asian states. It's about the collective framework shaped up by the European Union, specialized department of the European Commission, as I mentioned, Trade Department, with individual Asian states. Individual Asian states, as I mentioned, ROK, Japan, Australia, Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia, and so on. This is one chapter which exists. The problem is, as you always can imagine that, implementation. Ask the Romanian business people, ask any other European business people from Germany, France, how much they know about the provisions of the EU-Japan strategic economic partnership, how much they benefit of that, how much the trade chambers, the national commerce chambers have been able to translate with or not, inverted commas, the provisions of these trade agreements with various Asian countries in a way which the business people, the business community will properly understand and implement and benefit of this. For Romania, it was something because once Romania has joined the European Union as a full member state, the Romanian wines, as an example, were taxed like coming from a developed country. Then suddenly our exports of Romanian wines has dropped. Once this, in 2018, this economic partnership with Japan was agreed, EU-Japan economic partnership was agreed, the Romanian wine could resume being present on the Japanese market under the provisions of this economic partnership, which has indeed lowered the bilateral tariffs. It's one aspect, but how many other elements stimulating, favorizing the exports of the European countries, including Romania, are known by the normal foot soldiers, the business operators, the traders? Open question. Secondly, since 2018, especially 2018-19 till last year, collectively, the member states in different forums, from the European Council to the work of the foreign ministers, trade ministers, in the collective meetings, they adopted a number, they agreed and adopted a number of programs of the European Union under the collective decision of the member states, dedicated to expand, stimulate, and diversify the cooperation with the Asian member states. In which field? You might be surprised. Security, yeah, environment, connectivity, which in 2018 looked like the magic word, something which offered plus additional numbers of fields to be explored and implemented by the member states for an extended cooperation with the Asian member states. I was pleased to hear from a distinguished speaker at the beginning of our debate about what I used to call the institutional anemia, meaning regional institutions in East Asia, in general in Asia. There is no overall unity, collective organizations. The United States, having a huge merit, a historical one, and creating a number of international institutions. And you know what has happened globally with the United Nations and in Europe, including with the EEC, including with other, including OSCE, which was mentioned here, CSE, OSCE, and so on, has done less in Asia, and no others coming with strong initiatives. There is something like the so-called East Asia Summit, which is a sort of forum, a platform for dialogue at the level of the head of states and heads of governments. There is East Asia Economic Forum, another conference for the economic entities in which also Taiwan participates. There are other organizations which are based on the role of the ASEAN, Southeast Asian Nations Association, like the ASEAN Regional Forum and its dialogue with the big boys in the region, starting with USA, China, Japan, Australia, Indonesia, etc. But this forum is not exactly showing the role of the big powers, exactly the ones who are now hitting the air and the atmosphere, the climate in the region. But still, this does exist. Where is the European Union? European Union has started 25 years ago in 25 years of anniversary celebrated last year, the so-called process of Asia-Europe meeting. Last year, having a virtual summit in Cambodia. Every 2 years, summit, physically till the years before the pandemics. Since then, virtual summit, and every other year, a foreign minister meetings plus other ministers, including transportation, education ministers in this framework of Asia-Europe meeting was hosted by Romania in 2018. Then we have frameworks, is what I meant. There are frameworks for a collective debate cooperation, for trying to show the spirit of mutual understanding and the potential for cooperation and working together. But they did not display everything they can do. The potential is there. The results are rather disappointing in many ways. What I'm saying is, and I started by calling the moments now a wake-up call, that many other things which are happening. You have seen the other day, the President of the United States speaking about the need to reshape the global economic order. In Asia, there is already an economic order. Of course, immediately you will say, sure, we can all see China playing a leading role, a commanding center for the regional economic and trade activities in Asia. Of course, as it was rightfully mentioned, China is not the whole story. But China plays an important role, which sooner or later needs to be accommodated. And probably one major aspect of the new strategy, which may be proposed by the United States, by the president, might be how to treat China in this context. But already there are a number of frameworks in which the United States is not present in Asia. There is a regional economic order which has an intra-regional trade of around 2,600 billion US dollars, from which US is almost missing. The NAFTA intra-regional trade, where of course US is playing a leading role, is something like 2,400 billion US dollars, while the European EU inside EU intra-regional trade is something like 2,200 billion US dollars. Then Asia already has an economic global order. What will happen under the new circumstances? Of course, I finished with a question. I want to very much commend the list of questions which Mr. Caba Maria has displayed on the in front of us at the end of his presentation. Not necessarily easy, but that's the spirit in which I have to recognize I joined you in exploring the future, and I'm sure we all can benefit of that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your presentation, for all your work. And I just want to inform you, and I want to congratulate you, Ambassador, that you recently succeed to have a presentation, and now it's on YouTube, about diplomacy for children. It's very interesting. So maybe we have to think to explain to the children, because they will be the main beneficiary of our project, about Asia's century, how they have to benefit, and also for the children in Asia to understand it's so complicated. Europe, we have also difficulties to understand what is happening in Europe. But in any case, a future lesson from your side will be very beneficial. So also for these politicians, maybe for Romania, they have to start with this kind of lessons about diplomacy. So we are going now to the last speaker, Mr. Alexandru Georgescu. Dr. Alexandru Georgescu, it's now with us, not on the TV channels or radio, or I don't know which kind of launching, which kind of article and so on. But in any case, thank you so much accepting to be at the end. You are a fan of fast food, but also of this kind of thinking food for thought. So if you can merge the two, fast food, something like that, in a very short presentation, then to have a Q&A session, very short one. You are speaking about a reality, which is already a reality, cyber security, cyber diplomacy, which is your institute, it's and yourself. It's building not only in Europe, but also with ties with Asia. So you have the floor, 5 minutes, Dr. Georgescu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like the speakers before me, I wear many hats. Among them is a position of expert within the National Institute for Research and Development in Informatics, ICI Bucharest, one of the supporters of this project, Asia Century. And I'd like to mention just a few possibilities of the kinds of activities that could be organized practically under this initiative. I'm glad to be the final speaker, because after all of the high politics, high diplomacy, high geopolitics discussed by the previous speakers, we can also indulge in a discussion related to the prosaic reality of the complex world in which we live. And I would like to build on what Ambassador Istichoaia Budura mentioned about the existing economic global order in Asia. This is because there has been a lot of tendencies in Asia or in the Eurasian sphere to have integration initiatives. Every country with financial power projection, so not just power projection as we see it in the US, but financial power projection, has at one point tried to develop one or several Eurasian integration initiatives. So not just China, whose Belt and Road Initiative is the largest, the greatest, and the most well-resourced so far, but we have seen it in Japan, for instance, through its Eurasia Initiative, its Arc of Freedom of Prosperity, and other initiatives which have led, for instance, to Japan becoming the single largest source of official development assistance in Central Asia. We have seen it in South Korea with their own Eurasia initiative, the Silk Road Express, projects such as the Trans-Eurasian Information Network, and so on. We have, of course, China with its multiple economic corridors, and it's which are brought together in the strategic umbrella. And what does this mean? It means that over time, the countries in Eurasia also cooperating with countries in neighboring regions, whether Oceania or Europe, have created infrastructures which connect the region and facilitate the transport of goods, of people, and the transfer of ideas, technologies, and so on. And what we would like to propose as part of the activities for the project, for the Asia Century project, is to focus on the governance aspects and to share, firstly, the European experience in multilateral cooperation for governance in technology, protection, security, and so on, and also to develop new models together. In this regard, I would like to mention, as Professor Mureșan also mentioned, one, cyber diplomacy. This is an area where my institute, in cooperation with others, including other institutes in Europe, we have developed, for instance, courses for specialists and for decision makers within the European Union and within the member state governments, the ministries, and so on. Cyber diplomacy is an emerging field which tries to use diplomatic measures to govern issues related to cybercrime, cyber terrorism, cyber proliferation, and other issues which affect our prosperity worldwide. We have also discussed other issues related to cybersecurity in terms of, for instance, the risks to which we are exposed because of the complexity of the systems on which we rely. We see more and more cyber attacks, and we see the unintended consequences many times of the disruption to these systems. In a wider sense, we can cooperate within Asia Century on issues related to critical infrastructure protection, the transfer of experience, the development of new models. I remember, for instance, last year at the high-level symposium for think tanks within the 16+1, that is China's cooperation initiative with Central and Eastern European countries, I presented a paper on improving the safety and security of logistics networks within Eurasia, based on European experience and also the new models proposed by China and others. All of these issues can be developed. So there is not just a high-level strategic framework of thought within Asia Century where we discuss the lingering consequences of the Peace of Westphalia and other issues, but also practical implementation of an agenda that ensures the security of supply, of logistics, of cyber systems, the proper coordination between various institutions, because in the end, regardless of the geopolitical situation, the entrepreneurs will go ahead and cooperate with each other, companies will try to make profits, and we will be condemned to cooperate by the pre-existing and organically growing network of infrastructures in Eurasia. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Georgescu, for high-speed presentation, and we have now the chance to answer to some questions. If you want to put questions, please do it remarks, very short, and we are trying to manage so that in 10, not more than 10, 20 minutes to answer if you have to make some short, thoughtful remarks and questions to the speakers here, but also to the speakers which are connected via Zoom. Please.
Longer talk, shorter lunch.
Pardon?
Longer talk, shorter lunch.
Yes, or without lunch. No. No more lunch, just so, yeah, okay.
Victor Chonga is my name. I have two questions for the panel. What do you think will be the impact of the Ukrainian war
on the Asian arrangements between countries, because last year there was a poll in South Korea where 3/4 of the population was for creating a nuclear bomb. Also, South Korea signed the NPT. And second question related to what Mr. Georgescu said, will this work has a paradox, more integration, but on the other hand, we saw that recently in Russia, it was a trend to cut off the local internet network, separated it from the global one. So how do you think these events from Ukraine will impact on the climate in Asia? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I propose Ambassador of Indonesia to put the question, and if somebody else want to put questions, please do it now, because we want to offer the chance to answer to our colleagues.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm Indonesian ambassador, fully understand what we have, something like some, explanations from the key, persons. But I would like to know, before I ask you, I just to give some remark, regarding with that some, speakers announced just now that it could be, international new order. But from my perspective, because of this, international crisis, it is not, showing the international new order, but the international new shape. Even, we understood, some decade of the EU association or EU something like the community. But we understood when the Russia and Ukraine crisis, EU is not really, full understanding facing, the crisis. This is my remark. But my questions to Professor Anis. Telling about the academically, how to say analysis, the Ukraine and Russian crisis. So it is a real military, something like invasion or military special operations, or it is something like the civilizations, crisis. So I need something like, your response from my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So, please. Another question? Somebody else? No. Okay.
Okay, if I may respond quickly, of course, to give the chance for as many questions as possible. Thank you very much for the question. I think the actions of Russia with regards to the internet can be placed in a wider framework of struggle, especially on the part of non-Western countries, but also in Western countries, for concepts such as digital autonomy, digital sovereignty, data sovereignty, and so on. And you have different formulas, but they all end up in the same place, where especially the digital age infrastructure has promoted the centralization of control over systems, even though ownership may remain spread out. And this control can ultimately be used in geopolitical circumstances to achieve certain goals. So it becomes logical for a state to try to amend that issue. Before Russia started fragmenting its internet, it started passing laws saying that the data of Russian citizens can only be kept in data centers on its territory. Other countries, Russia included, but mainly China, have created their local national champions to provide the same connectivity services, payments, blogging, social media, and so on, that can be provided by Western equivalents, specifically to separate their information spheres and to maintain a degree of control. I do not know what the end result of this trend would be, but it's clear that even in Europe, we have had discussions about the fragmentation of the European internet, about digital sovereignty. There are still disputes with the United States over the use of the data of European citizens and the access of American technology companies in the digital sphere to European markets. And these issues ultimately lead to this, that countries will pursue, let's call it infrastructure sovereignty to the extent that they are able. Smaller countries will not be able to do it completely, but mid-level and large countries will try to do this. One example that I can give you also from my experience. Most global navigation satellite systems like the GPS and GLONASS are militarized. But the Europeans created one that is civilian controlled and is supported especially by small states such as Poland, Romania, and others, because being military controlled, it is supposedly immune to arbitrary removal of service in case of crisis and so on. So this is one example. In the end, the trend is also towards greater integration, but just like the movement of a stock or the movement of a commodity, it goes up for a while, then it goes down a bit, then maybe it goes up even more. So it's never a linear process, and it's the same for this integration. We are now in a phase where globalization maybe is becoming a sort of slowbalization, where in certain aspects, critical aspects, it is being turned back, but the overall trend is still one of integration, because many countries are at the frontier of productivity and technology, and they need to integrate to have new sources of growth. Thank you very much.
Look, globalization and multilateralization are sometimes compatible processes, but they are not identical. Globalization would favor stronger, whereas our big papa, the high priest of globalization, Klaus Schwab, would say, in former times it was the big was eating small, and now fast is eating slow. Okay, so globalization would favor the big and the fast. And the multilateralization offers the same footing for the small and for the big. And this is humanization of our civilization, of the race. Doing perfect, of course, so now we are losing credibility in Europe talking about how beautiful we are with the war practically 1 hour flight from here, and it's getting closer. So, but still, the Peace of Westphalia, which was starting with the Chancellor Metternich, the concept of Europe, 100 years of peace, and also what we lived up to basically this crisis of Ukraine for 75 years, are really lessons to attend. And what is happening right now in Ukraine is not, against the spirit of Helsinki, is departure from the spirit of Helsinki. And this is what I'm all the time referring. So the multilateralization as a philosophy and of harmony of how people and the nations can live is still very worth to have and to attend and to revisit and rethink all the time. And this is how I see our cooperation, most and first of all. And of course, we can't exhaust even questions, the items, and not even to answer that in this short format and in this short setting. This is an appetizer. The real lunch or dinner will come later. So what I'm inviting you to think how to make a follow-up and to make really a 1 day or 2 day setting, in which we will more thoroughly express views and the ideas and even invite scholars or the practitioners from your capitals, so be it in Romania, in Austria, in Slovenia, or somewhere in Asia, and to follow this process. I still believe that actually there is no alternative to cooperation. And even what is happening, we are talking about China, and the distinguished ambassador was mentioning, so with the respect of the smaller, we can't forget China, and many would accommodate to the rise of China. Unification of Germany, always in history, unification of the center of Europe meant war. The only possible unification of Germany without war was happening in Europe, which was multilateralized, which was having the settings of OSCE and of Council of Europe. and then of EU. So of course, the reminiscent of the imperial Germany in Asia is China. And China is looking for the space. China, of course, as Minister Fasslavender was telling, okay, was a terrestrial power, and now they see the opportunity on the seas. Okay, so it has to be accommodated. And again, we are coming to this actually to a collective mechanisms of security in expressing the needs. There is a mantra which starts actually with these Hobbesian ideas, and I don't want to go to philosophy, with Adam Smith, Invisible Hands of Adam Smith, if we trade and if we produce and we exchange goods, everything will be peace and love, honey and milk. It's not like that. The Europeans were trading like never before in 1912, in 1913, in 1940, and still they started the war. By 22nd of June, 41, literally Russian trains were coming to Germany with the raw materials, and German planes were flying to bomb Soviet Union. So the trade was taking place even in the minutes when the major confrontation of two big powers and which will be a turning point of Second World War was taking place. So that means the trade is not fitting. So what brought the peace was actually a comprehensive setting, which was not excluding anyone. Why actually League of Nations was unsuccessful? Because it excluded by the Guild-Clausen Imperial Germany and was excluding Soviet Union by the force of ideology. Europeans or the world was making the logic, okay, they are communists, so we don't like them, we exclude them. So they excluded powers. And one of the shortcomings of the EU is also that excludes Turkey. Well, Turkey is supposed to guard us in Europe, but so it's a soldier that keeps us protected, but sleeps out of the tent. We don't want this soldier to sleep in the tent, so he should sleep outside. And the Russia. So it's not a comprehensive mechanism. And those are all chapters that we have to revisit, and that's what we can bring as a value added to Asians, without going into particularities of the reasons of the conflict. Conflict right now that is happening is a departure from the spirit of Helsinki, is departure from what is in the imperfect times of the post-Napoleonic order was so-called Metternich concept of a concept of Europe. So it brought us 100 years of peace, and then the settlements, the comprehensive settlements of Dunbar to Knox and everything that happened in with the formation of United Nations, but especially in Europe, that brought us 75 years of imperfect, but still peace and harmony and prosperity of the small. We should not forget that the small were prosperous in the period of 100 years since the Napoleonic force to the First World War, and also 75 years after the end of Second World War was a period of prosperity of the small. Small could articulate itself culturally, linguistically, economically, politically, even militarily to extent, and still live in harmony and in concept. And I think that's the point that gathers us, let's say, on a same mission in a way. Thank you.
If I may add something,
Yeah, please.
just very briefly, without wanting to detract from your response, I just wanted to add something to what I said earlier. We can have a litmus test now. If we can see the reaction of countries to the sanctioning of the Russian central bank and to the exclusion from SWIFT of certain banks. If countries, regardless of their position on the war in Ukraine, feel that this means that they are vulnerable from an infrastructure perspective, then we will see more countries and institutions enrolling in, for instance, China's cross-border interbank payment system and so on, to diversify their risk, and we will have basically a fragmentation of the global system, which was recently dominated in the area of cross-border interbank payments, was dominated by SWIFT. And now it would be SWIFT and chips from China, but also who knows what else would appear. So we have that test, and we can see in the next period what will happen. Thank you.
So we are coming slowly to the Ambassador, you want to have an intervention? If you accept to be involved to the discussion? No, thank you. So, Mr. Mironov, you are representing the future. You are writing about Belt and Road projects and so on. So very short, please, very short intervention because we are close.
One question actually. In 3-4 years, we shall be 8 billion earthlinks. Do we consider that the laws of the society will have to be upgraded or even changed, or maybe some new laws will have to be discovered? And let me address two items. One, on Earth, 90% of the population is going to school. It is changing the mind of Earth. Second, the emergence of Homo faber, the engineer, the creator, the discoverer. She is providing us the artificial intelligence, which will change everything, even how and what diplomats think. The question is, do we think that the future is coming?
Yeah, please. Future is knocking at our door. Future is with us to this meeting. Yes, it's difficult to answer. Professor, if you want to say something.
I think we overrated technology, you know, so humans will still exist, you know, with a full appreciation of having all other, you know, high priests of new age of technology and new ageism. I think humans will still better, and the logics and the empathy of humans, you know, so machines are the tendon, you know, so in many books I always refer to geopolitics and to technology. So I'm pretty much following what does it mean technology for human development. So practically everything I was writing was always connected to develop technology. And the tendency of humans is always, you know, when we come to a grasp or when we see the shape, the outer shape of some technology, we are just unselectively jumping and falling into a deep love and emotion to technology. And then we have step 1, 2 step back, you know. So it happened with everything, you know, when we had this famous DDT, you know, the pesticides, you know, when we came to anti-baby pills, you know, when we came to hairsprays, you know, which killed the ozone, when we came also to, I don't know, to genetic therapies, and you know, so we've been obsessively rushing into it and then seeing actually the limits. So I don't believe that artificial intelligence will anytime soon replace humans completely. Of course, machines, you know, they're replacing the physical, because humans are having 2 powers, the physical and the mental power. And then the logics, the narrative goes, okay, the machines were replacing humans. So we sit more in offices, we are not in agriculture because we have machines doing this. And they are the luders, you know, the famous movement, you know, of the workers, of the labor in Britain were coming in the night. They believe actually that the machines are guilty for their poor status, so they've been destroying machines, the luders movement. So they falsely believed it was the circumstance, the social circumstance. And then now, you know, we are also blaming artificial intelligence that will replace us. The medical surgeries, operations are done by the artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. But they are very, very far, you know, from the successful deployment of gene therapy or from the artificial intelligence replacing humans in diplomacy or other activities. We are far away. If we ever reach this, we are hundreds and hundreds of years away. But what matters is not actually the fact, but it's our opinion, and that brings dangers, because we believe that there is a silver bullet, and this is pretty much propagated by Western media, feeling that actually there is a deep structural crisis. There is no silver bullet, and I think there is no alternative but the thorough debate and discussion and the revisiting of important chapters of human development.
So thank you so much, and if you accept, I don't see any other person who raised a hand. So about the future, Mr. Mironov, I think that Mr. Mironov, I think that you can have an article in Știință și Tehnică, which is a #1 publication in Science Romania, about the role of aliens in Asia and so on. So this could be on our agenda in 10 years when we are making a celebration of our initiative. We can put on the agenda this one. So because we have here also General Prunaru, our Romanian cosmonaut. So maybe we have to think about to introduce the topic of aliens and the presence of aliens and the development in the future. So, but now you are the representative of aliens, or
hopefully League of Aliens.
Yeah.
If I may also venture an answer, we've seen in the last few years a lot of books titled "The Revolt Against the Elites," "The Tyranny of the Elites," the fall of the expert class, and so on. So one of the issues that we have is that many of our problems have to be solved through organic measures where we can have a certain input, but the actual result will be different because the systems are so complex that we cannot anticipate the results. There are emerging behaviors that we could not have anticipated, good or bad, and so on. And what happens is that, especially in the West and in Western derived societies, and also where we have a very high-tech society, there is this idea, this managerial idea where you can design a clockwork mechanism which would automatically solve issues. And this idea has been disproven time and time again because the systems are too complex and we are littered around us. We see the detritus of failed policies and failed plans, because they do not account for the variability in the system. And this is the same with the growth of the population. Most of the population growth until 2100, according to the United Nations, will be in Africa, not in Eurasia. It will be a huge issue in terms of the youth bulge, in terms of preventing radicalization, ensuring education, food security, and so on. But especially in the international system, it cannot be designed by committee or anything like this. It can only come as a result of an emerging process of cooperation, which involves all of the actors, including the United States, China, Europe, and the countries themselves that will be facing these issues. So otherwise, what happens is that you will try to implement things, and not only will they not work, but you will lose legitimacy because the populations themselves rebel against them.
Yes, thank you so much. So one of my personal conclusion before to give the floor to Flavius is that you mentioned that India is a sleeping giant or something like that. Let's accept that I think that Europe is a sleeping giant and don't understand the importance and of Asia and what we have to do from European side to Asia. We are in front of a summit of EU Asia, and we hope to pass the message in this respect. So at the very end, Mr. President, Francisca Maria, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very short, because we are a little bit delayed after 2 hours, 15 minutes, because you started at 11:15 and another 15 minutes, so half an hour. I would like also to thank you very much that you stay until the end. I know that the embassy has a lot of things to solve during this time. And I think this discussion is a starting point to analyze and to understanding the concept of Asia century, and with the assistance of the embassies from Asia and the whole Asia continent, even though Professor Hassan said Indo-Pacific, we try to understand more about your perspective and you are very open to organizing and to have other events to overcome and to find out our common interest. I am very pleased that also in Asia and with assistance Professor ANIS, we have different contact, for example, like D8 developing countries, that is very important organization as a for economic cooperation for sure. And the other mechanism in Asia, particularly as in Thailand, I was set up as an Asia Cooperation Dialogue. There is another organization that we can also work together. And we didn't mention too much about OIC. That is very relevant, especially in the certain part of Asia. So I would like to thank you very much that you have this opportunity. We have this opportunity, and you have been here together with us to have this exchange of view. After this event, you are making a short summary, and will deliver all the participants in order to see our main highlights.